Thank you for tuning in to an episode of InRange. This is the July 2019 Q&A. All the questions here are provided by our Patreon supporters, which are at the $5 and above level. And if you want to be able to submit questions, please consider supporting us on Patreon. If you already are, thank you so much. There are so many questions that we always have to truncate them, but there's a bunch in here that were repeat questions, and if you have asked one and not got it in, just mention that it's a repeat question, and I'll always try to put it to the top. So,
unless it's a dumb question.
Well, that doesn't happen. Our supporters they make the best questions. We have the best supporters with the best questions. So there's no dumb questions.
All right. First question is from Karl. If you were to go backpack camping in bear country, what would you take with you?
We talked about this a little. You had an answer about backpack camping in general.
A steak.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 steaks.
Yeah.
A sleeping bag. An RV.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go backpacking. You know what? I used to.
Yeah.
And then I lived in a trailer for a while. I lived in a van first, and then a trailer, and then a barn. And now I've kind of lost a lot of my excitement for like roughing it overnight in the outdoors. Like I really appreciate a house now.
Yeah, I understand that. And we're filming this in a house, but I live in a very rural desert area. And when people go, "Do you want to go camping?" the honest truth is, I open my front door and walk outside, and I'm camping. So when you live in that environment, the allure of that is diminished quite a bit.
So the actual question, of course, like, what would you shoot a bear with in an emergency?
I think that's the real question. Yeah.
Yes.
So my answer to this is there's 2 things that come to mind. One of which is the real answer is I would like a shotgun with a 3-inch Magnum round in it. Do I want to carry a shotgun all day? I don't know. So if I don't, then I would start looking at things like a 500 Magnum wheel gun.
Big revolver.
Yeah, big wheel gun.
Big cartridge. Big cartridge translates poorly to semi-auto pistol. Hence, big wheel gun.
But if I was willing to carry it, I'd bring in a shotgun with a 3-inch Magnum slug.
If I would, to my point of view, if it's serious, if like I'm concerned enough about bears that I am willing to carry a shotgun with me because of it, specifically for that reason, I'm not going to go there.
Well, I disagree with you on that, and here's why. There's a place up in Alaska called Barrow. It's like the northernest town in the entire of Alaska. It's a Barrow being it's a place where a lot of indigenous people live. It's currently there's a lot of people living there for oil purposes. But there's a little hike you can go on from Barrow to the northernest tip of the North American continent. And apparently polar bears literally do eat people there. There's stories of people getting chased back into town square and being eaten by a polar bear in the city town square. So the answer up there are shotguns, and that's what people use for that, and because slugs do a good job on that. And it turns out, I didn't know this, but polar bears are apparently the most aggressive of the bears.
Okay.
So,
let's see. I am going to right now add Barrow. I have a list going of places I'm not going to live.
Yeah.
And I'm adding Barrow to it.
Okay, cool. I actually want to go on that trip. I think that'd be kind of neat. It's kind of a Hemingway sort of stupid experiment.
I think that's a good description.
He hunts U-boats. I think it'd be fun to hike in polar bear country. But anyways.
Denver says, what parts kits builds have you done?
The answer for me is simple. 1, which was the Set Me L we did.
Okay. I, of course, did a Set Me L there, and then I had a period where I did a bunch of parts kit building. I did a couple 1919s and a whole pile of AKs.
Yeah. You were on an AK kick, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, this was at the time when AK builds were a really cost-effective thing. Today, they're only viable as I want the experience, and it seems like an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
Back then, you can get the rifle for like half the cost of a new one, or even less, by doing it yourself. I even did a handful of ones where I started with a receiver flat and did all the bending and the drilling and the heat treating and the whole. I did a few of those, and then I'm like, wow, that's kind of a pain. And then I bought some receivers and did parts kits builds there. Again, this is when $89, maybe $99 would get you a brand new parts kit, original barrel, all matching numbers, everything.
And then they started taking the barrels out, and then it started becoming more expensive. And parts kits aren't what they were.
No, they absolutely aren't.
And on top of that, I think a lot of people don't think of this as parts kits, and I'm going to go ahead but really, when you build an AR anymore, it's a parts kit build. You're not a gunsmith. You're buying all the parts and putting it together.
Wait, okay, well, that's different than a parts kit.
No, it's the same thing.
Assembly.
Okay, well, what is that?
Building a parts kit is getting out the welding torch. It's like what we did with the semi-Ls.
Well, that's just a bad design if you have to weld on it.
It's a welded together gun. That's how it works.
Well, then you get a bunch of AR parts, screw them together with a couple wrenches. You've done a parts build, and there's no welding included.
Okay, that's cool. I'm going to go to Toys R Us and buy some Legos and do a parts kit build with Legos.
Yeah,
Because that's
fair.
the same level. To me, It's not a build
I was being
unless
snarky.
you are welding or hammering rivets.
Okay, so it has to be some antique, archaic thing.
Yeah, otherwise it's just assembly.
And that's assembly of an archaic thing.
Eamon has a repeat question. If you could not use a semi-auto rifle or pistol, for whatever reason, would you rather use a pump shotgun or a pistol caliber lever gun for home defense?
Oh, this is a piece of cake for me. The lever gun in a heartbeat. Pump action shotguns to me are a nightmare. I mean, they are viable, and you can practice with them, become good with them. But the reality of malfunctions in pump action shotguns are real, especially under stress, especially if you short stroke and people go, well, you don't do that. Well, things happen. Lever guns, first of all, higher rate of fire. It's a rifle, not a shotgun, which I just prefer in general for my purposes. And the types of malfunctions that induce, either it's catastrophic and the gun's broken, or it doesn't happen and they don't happen often. I like lever guns.
My gut is pump action shotgun.
Okay.
I just have never really spent much time with lever guns.
I did a lot of cowboy shooting.
Yeah.
So
I think probably 90% of my trigger time with lever guns is published here on InRange.
So it's aggregate of like an hour.
Yeah, pretty much. So
Okay.
I haven't done a lot more with pump shotguns, but I have done more. And I feel more comfortable with pump shotgun.
It may simply be bias based on familiarity,
Oh, that's a totally legit reason.
but I would totally go with the lever gun.
Yeah. Grumpy Badger wants to know, are striker-fired pistols making DASA pistols obsolete? For defensive use in particular, is it better to steer a new shooter towards striker-fired?
Well, this is an interesting thing because I would not use the word obsolete or even obsolescent for DASA. I would think it's a different system, but it's neither obsolete nor obsolescent. Mm-hmm. However, I still would steer a new shooter towards a striker-fired gun because of the consistency of trigger pull from first shot to last shot. The amount of training to keep a DA gun at the levels you want to be at are much. You have to put a lot more effort into a DA gun.
Yeah, I would agree.
But it's not obsolete.
I agree on both points. Yeah.
Okay.
There's absolutely a place for a DASA, but it's a gun that requires a little more dedication on the part of the shooter to maintain proficiency.
Hmm.
Just if you have a new shooter and they just want something that's going to work and be easy, get them a Glock.
And no, that's true. And a new shooter also, you want them to be able to make progress within relatively short duration of time.
Yeah.
Frustration's a thing.
Yeah.
And when your first shot misses with every DA shot fired until you get to that skill level, frustration will increase rapidly.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then that's when you're going to end up with people doing things they oughtn't, like, manually drawing the thing and manually cocking the hammer as they do, or carrying it with the chamber empty and racking it as they draw it, because why not? I'm not going to hit with the first round in double action anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, Garrett says, do you think it is better to piece together a carry first aid kit or purchase one pre-built and vacuum sealed? I'm leaving this one to you.
Personally, I think you're better off putting your own together, unless you go to someone who specifically puts together like starter kits, for lack of a better term, or like a basic trauma kit. Like the Tactical Medic, who we talked about on this page before, and there are many vendors that do this. That happens to be someone I've dealt with and know, and he does have kits that are ready for that purpose. But even then, when you get the baseline trauma kit, there's stuff in there that's above my pay grade, like a pneumothorax needle, lung needles.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not punching lungs. I'm just not. Like what I want for my basic trauma kit is simple: a proper tourniquet, which you can argue about. I like CAT. A proper pressure bandage, probably an Israeli style, and some sort of a bunch of gauze and some sort of hemostatic agent like Quick Clot. If you get those 4 things in your trauma kit, now that's not a boo-boo kit, that's a serious trauma kit. Those 4 things alone really make a basic trauma kit for one wounded individual. You don't need more than that. And so it's hard to find a kit that just focuses on that. Go to Tactical Medic, see if he's got one like that, but if not, I would piece it together. When you pre-build, it's like all this stuff and you're like, what's this thing and why? Yeah.
I think there's an argument some people would make that it's worth having it because someone else might be there who has the training and might not have that piece of gear around, but I get what you're saying.
But you also have to carry that.
Right.
And the more you carry it, the less likely you are to carry it.
That's true.
So it's better to have on you something smaller that doesn't have a needle and an NG tube and all this crazy stuff.
That makes sense, yeah.
So,
Greg says, how well did famous firearms designers do financially? Did Browning get rich? Garand, Stoner.
Stoner did.
Stoner was pretty well off. Not as well off as Browning.
Yeah, Browning did really well.
Browning was fantastically wealthy, to the point that Browning was able to do things like credit the U.S. government back literally millions of dollars in patent fees during the World Wars. Because, like, you know what? I've got more money than I can possibly spend in my lifetime. The U.S. is trying to win this war. the $5 million they would owe me on patent, on royalties for gun X, they can spend that on something else instead. Browning was
he was a rock. He was a rock star.
Yeah, totally. Largely because unlike Stoner and Garand, he did the majority of his work actually was commercial.
Yeah,
he wasn't. Kalashnikov did not get rich.
He actually and Browning fished his different designs around to different companies and got better contracts. FN.
Oh, it was a business.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and he did a good job with that.
Yeah. In fact, the whole reason he ended up going to FN was they were willing to pay him a royalty instead of a flat fee for a patent.
Now, Stoner did well.
Stoner did okay. Garand did not become wealthy. Not at all. He wasn't, didn't end up homeless on the street, but he was a Springfield Armory government employee. He did not get any royalties for his work because it was all done on government time. He didn't do badly. I think he was, as far as I can tell, he was quite comfortable and content with his life. Pedersen did better than Garand did.
On the money success level, you got Browning at the top.
Yeah.
Then I would say Stoner would be under that, and then Garand after that.
Well, Pedersen first.
Then Garand.
A lot of people may not be familiar with all of Pedersen's work because he did a lot of commercial work too. You think about the Pedersen device and the Pedersen toggle lock rifle, they're super cool. They must be the pinnacle of his work when, he also did a pump action Sporter 22. Well, guess which one made him the most money?
He was the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, and this wasn't in the question, but neither was Pedersen. Kalashnikov. Mm-hmm. He pretty much lived on a basic government stipend and never made real money.
He never made money, but he did have status.
He had status, but not financial status.
True.
Now, I don't know how much of this is what it is, but there's a quote, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact quote. But Kalashnikov said something along the lines of, "My name is on the most famous gun in the world, and I live in this little hut." And Stoner designed
a flat,
shack, whatever. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the Russian word, even though I can see it in my brain. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. But Stoner's name isn't on his gun, and he's wealthy. There was a quote around that, and it's an interesting. He's right. It's an interesting point. Different governments, different systems, different worlds.
If you're not familiar with it, there was a fascinating incident in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when Kalashnikov actually came over and visited the United States, arranged by a gun collecting group, and met up with Stoner.
Everyone's seen the famous picture of them holding each other's rifles.
Yeah.
That was at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. There are certainly some other designers who ended up penniless and unhappy and often alcoholic. Evelyn Owen, the Australian Owen gun, he died young as an alcoholic. Very tragic life. Yeah.
Wow.
Imo Lottie, the Finn.
Yeah.
Alcoholic, depressed, died relatively early. Yeah.
I don't know how much that's related to firearms design or how much that's just related to the normal human condition.
I don't think it has anything directly to do with the fact that they're designing firearms. It may have something to do with they are independent entrepreneurial people, and that's a line of work that has a lot of risk in it.
Oh man, you know what? Just take a modern example of anyone trying to do a startup in tech sector.
Or gun sector.
No, but it's very much, that's even worse. But the tech sector did it too.
Yeah.
Anything that's an emerging technology, so there's going to be this small number, like the ones mentioned here, that rise to the top, and there's going to be a whole lot that fall to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens.
Carl says, Karl, what is your favorite Norwegian food or drink?
Oh, I'm real boring on this one, actually. When I was a kid, I grew up, and my grandmother used to sit and watch TV, and she'd have a nice cup of tea with toast and bread and toast, which is brownost or bronost. It's brown cheese. But it's like a piece of toast with butter and this brown cheese that most people think has the consistency of peanut butter, but doesn't taste anything like peanut butter. It's a goat cheese. Oh, I love that. So that on a piece of toast with a tea, maybe that's more nostalgia than it is flavor, but I really enjoy that.
He doesn't ask which is best tasting. He just says, what's your favorite?
There's my super simple answer. Toast with toast.
And here I thought you were going to say fermented shark.
No, that's Icelandic. It's not Norwegian.
Charles says, do you think the adoption of 5.56 or a similar round would have been delayed or never happened if NATO had adopted the 280 British? And would this have been better or worse overall?
Well, I've never thought of this.
I have.
Okay.
5.56 still would have been adopted.
Okay, why?
The fact of the matter is 280, while the bullet diameter is smaller, the cartridge overall is not really. It is it's like, if you look at a 280 British magazine, it's pretty darn close to a 308 magazine.
So it's a lot more like 6.5 Japanese.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or in some ways, you can almost think of it as like 6.5 Creedmoor. It's the same sort of action length. It's a lighter bullet. It is a less powerful round. It would have been a better rifle round than 7.62 NATO. It would have also been a worse machine gun round at the same time.
So it's 6.5 Japanese by that standard, though.
Yeah. But I think the critical factor is one of the big things you get from 5.56 and 5.45 is being able to carry twice as much ammunition for the same weight and the same space. And 280 did not give you that advantage.
And 5.45 even more so.
Yeah. 280 is a little lighter than 308 because the bullet's lighter.
Sure.
But in terms of bulk, like the number of physical magazines you can carry on you, they're going to be 20 round magazines. And it's going to be like maybe 8 instead of 6, but it's not 12 like you can carry with 5.56.
Yeah, I get that.
So I think 280 would have been better than 7.62 for the rifle. If you want to argue over the entire small arms package, there's a very viable argument to be made that 308 was better, even though it was a worse rifle round because of the machine gun application. But either way, 5.56 would still have happened.
We're going to get comments on this because I mentioned 6.5 Japanese, but in reality, this is not the question you asked, but it's in the same vein. And I'll just head it off before we even go there. Did they make the wrong call going to 7.7?
It's debatable.
I think you can argue they did.
7.7 is better in machine guns. 6.5 is better in rifles, which are more important.
Machine guns are important, but the Japanese machine gun presence wasn't exactly impressive anyway. I mean, they had good machine guns.
They had a lot of good light machine guns.
Yeah, they did, but
used them well.
Does that really matter in 6.5 or 7.7 when you're blasting some guy?
I
Quieter, less recoil, less flash?
I don't know that I really have the ability to give an effective answer to that question at this point.
All I can say, I agree. I wasn't in combat with these guns. I can say that when you shoot a 6.5 Arasaka versus a 7.7, it's a very pleasant gun.
Yeah, 6.5 is definitely better for rifles.
And on paper, it's certainly ballistically capable.
Well, the big reason that they had was that they found too many soldiers recovered from 6.5 millimeter wounds and re-entered service, and they had to shoot them again a second time.
Wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to wound the enemy, not kill them.
Yeah, it's funny that isn't actually the thing.
Anyways.
That was actually, as far as I can tell, the Japanese did actually adhere to that. But they didn't really take into account that, then the guys come back. Because they do, and they did, in the Russo-Japanese War. And that's...
Oh, interesting.
The Japanese actually made a number of efforts to move to a larger caliber starting before World War I.
Greater lethality.
Yeah, and the problem was just like something came up every time, and they didn't end up making it actually happen until 1939.
Interesting.
But it was something they were looking at before they were embedded in China.
Yeah, interesting.
Lance says, Karl, as a Marine Corps radio operator, I work with radio encryption nearly every day. Is there any way I can encrypt my civilian communications, such as radios or my day-to-day communication devices?
I don't work and have really not ever done anything in radio space. I'm not a ham guy or any of that, so I can't answer radio. I did work at a company where we did line encryptors for the military, where you would actually plug the devices in, and that would be your encryption bridge, which is probably something you might be working with or something similar to that. Line encryptors are one thing. There's not a lot of line encryptor kind of stuff that I'm familiar with in the consumer space, except something that someone homebrews. Maybe it exists. I don't know. I don't do radio. But I left this question in because I did want to answer the most basic form of communication that everybody uses, which is a modern cell phone or a smartphone. The answer to that really is singularly use Signal. Signal is an application that is end-to-end encryption. It's done on the device, so your encryption keys never leave the device. It's architected in the right way for identification and making sure that there's actually the person. It does not only encryption, but also properly identifies the source and warns you when it sees a man in the middle or something like that. So I would say that I don't know about radios, but when it comes to what everyone uses nowadays, just smartphones, I highly, highly recommend Signal.
Now, WhatsApp is encrypted too.
Signal.
Why not WhatsApp?
I don't know a lot about WhatsApp. Actually, I have to look into WhatsApp. But Signal provides the ability to do normal type messaging and have a messenger type experience. Isn't WhatsApp ephemeral? Doesn't the stuff on there kind of evaporate?
No. WhatsApp is a normal.
I've never used WhatsApp, but I can tell you that I vetted and worked with Signal, and I trust Signal.
Okay.
So maybe WhatsApp is fine as well. That would be an answer that would have to take time.
Okay. I bring this up because I know that's going to immediately show up in the comments.
I like the question. I don't know the answer to that, but I can personally recommend Signal as a solution that I believe and trust and believe is properly architected.
As a historically oriented guy, I have an easier answer that applies across all technologies. Speak Navajo. Problem solved.
That's not anymore. Algorithms will get cut right through that like butter today. So anyways, the reason I give you that answer is WhatsApp might be great, so I don't want to misinterpret that. The problem is when you talk about encryption, you have to be very careful because things that might be encrypted, there's ways to do encryption wrong in almost every possible way. I don't know about WhatsApp, but Signal's done right. So that's why I'm recommending Signal.
Okay. Next up is Dandy Echo, who says, why did box magazines for shotguns never take off like they did for rifles?
Because it puts you in the open division at 3-gun.
That's not what I was going to say.
That is one of the reasons.
Yes, but 3-gun has not been around nearly as long as box magazine fed shotguns.
But it is one of the reasons that's happening now. Because, for
Yes.
example, there's like a Mossberg 590M, and that's actually a very interesting magazine fed shotgun that is not making where the progress it should because of weird rules and divisions in 3-gun.
The reason that it took so long for box magazines to even become a thing is, first off, there wasn't really a huge demand for high capacity shotguns. And secondly, a shotgun shell is a terrible, terrible design for a box magazine. It has a very narrow but highly protruding rim.
It does.
And it's difficult to get those to work in box magazines. And that's why the tube was a thing. Just like in lever action rifles with rimmed pistol ammunition, you've got that rim to use for your extractor, to use for your feeding system. It doesn't interfere in a tube magazine. It works great. Like, in some ways, rims are actually beneficial for a tube magazine. Box magazine is exactly the opposite. And you'll find a very few out there with like 2+1 box magazines, like at pawn shops for $50 because they're terrible. And the bolt action ones.
And when you mention rims, look at the mechanical gyrations you have to go through with 54R and a Mosin Nagant, for example.
Right.
Which is essentially a box magazine. It's not not detachable, but you have to have an interrupter or thing so you don't get rim lock and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Rims are terrible for box magazines.
Same rules apply. However, there are box fed magazines, shotguns now that are great. The 590M is good. If you can get a Saiga that works or a Vepr, those are incredible. If you get one that works, so it's possible. And I say in modern day, the problem is that I think that I was kind of tongue in cheek with 3-gun, but I think they're there now.
Yeah, because prior to that sort of competition shooting, there's really not that much demand for a high capacity shotgun.
I agree.
I mean, contrary to urban legend, guys were not actively trench raiding in World War I with shotguns.
No, those things actually weren't that effective, and
Yeah.
the troops didn't really like them.
Yeah, and it wasn't a result of it being low capacity either. Leave it for Othnius to blow that whole myth out of the water. But you didn't need... I mean, people today like to think that if a gun doesn't hold, X plus 500 rounds, it's worthless.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of practical uses for firearms that don't require a lot of ammo in the guns. So some idiot's going to interpret that now as like I'm anti-big magazines, which is not the case.
No.
But
it just wasn't seen as a need.
it has to be commercially viable. It will not get produced if there aren't a substantial enough number of people who are willing to pay money for it. So, all right, next is from Spencer. Why do you think water-cooled machine guns were completely abandoned and never had roles in mounted applications like tanks and armored vehicles where weight and bulk isn't a concern?
Isn't it because the water jacket gets punctured easily by shrapnel?
That's certainly one reason.
Okay.
The other is I think that it turns out that it's really more of a pain than you actually need.
Yeah.
Like, water jackets were developed from literally the very first true machine guns. The original Maxim gun, the prototype, which is like this big, is water cooled. Because the idea was you're going to be just belt after belt after belt after belt.
The idea is almost a static position that can apply non-stop, uninterrupted, forever sustained fire.
Yeah, well,
and if you keep adding water, you can essentially run the gun perpetually.
By the end of World War I, people realized that you have to develop tactics that don't allow you to be victim to a machine gun sitting there just hosing down an entire division. So once people stopped presenting targets where you needed to be able to fire 1,000 rounds in a row, you stop needing to be able to fire 1,000 rounds in a row. And once you have modern small unit, fire and movement sort of tactics, open order tactics, you don't need the water cooling. And if you don't need it, it's a really great thing to be able to get rid of on the gun. Because especially like on the Maxim guns, they're recoil operated. The barrel's moving, and you actually have to seal the front and the back of the water tank.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why, by the way, on video today, you virtually always see them leaking water because they used like mercury asbestos paste.
Yeah.
Actually, it was like asbestos thread.
There's like death goo ring in there.
Yeah.
Like, that's not legal in any country in the world.
Yeah, anymore. Yeah. So, and you couple that with they are potentially the other once if you have a water cooled gun, it's going to have a really small barrel in it. Because why would you waste weight on a heavy barrel when it's surrounded in water?
Yep.
So you puncture that water jacket, and now you've got like the barrel on a Vickers gun is thinner than a lot of commercial hunting rifles. Like that thing doesn't go very long before it overheats if you don't have water.
So suddenly your continuously sustained rate of fire goes from incredible to nothing.
Right.
And so by adding mass to the barrel and putting a cooling jacket around it or something like that's not water cooled.
Right.
And then actually shooting and scooting, air cooled does the job that really you needed to do. And a big heavy water cooled machine gun going that way, when you get flanked, now becomes a big heavy problem.
Yeah. So the British would continue to use the Vickers gun because they had it. Because it was a mechanically excellent gun, and they spent an incredible amount of money. Those things were ludicrously expensive, Maxims and Vickers both.
Yeah.
And they already had them. So it works. There's other money, we can do better with our money than replacing these things until the end of World War II. U.S. used 1917 water-cooled guns because, again, we have them.
Although not necessarily as the predominant front thing.
No, but we were still using them in World War II.
An example is I was doing research for another video that is coming on the channel at some point. The 1917 water cools were frequently used at POW camps.
Yeah.
Which makes a complete... We have this.
Right.
And we put this here. It's not mobile. It doesn't need to be. It's on a guard tower.
Right.
Yeah.
Can take the air-cooled gun and use it.
But you take the
where it's best.
1919 and stick it on the Jeep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, there you go. Tim asks, anything current or upcoming in the firearms industry that has either of you excited or interested?
Maybe the Acro.
Acro's nice, but I'm not exactly super excited.
I'm interested in using
It'll be
it.
cool. It'll be
Yeah.
better. There's not anything I really know that I can think of that's particularly exciting to me. That's why I like historical guns. They're a lot more interesting than the modern ones.
Yeah. I can't come up with anything. No.
Wow, we suck. E. Raja says, what non-warring country in World War II had the best small arms, and would those be any good in World War II?
Sweden.
Yeah. We talked about this before.
We did. But it's the first thing that popped to mind. And as we discussed it, it turned out to be like we couldn't come up with a better answer than that.
Yeah.
They had, first of all, they had excellent, if you were going bolt action, the Swede Mauser is a fantastic example of that.
Yep.
And they have the Lungman.
Yeah.
Which is really, besides the fact that it will cut your thumb off worse than an M1, it is a really effective semi-automatic gun.
This is probably a mistake for me to say, but offhand, it's the only issued semi-auto I can think of in World War II that wasn't issued by a participatory power.
Yep.
Everyone else who had semi-autos was fighting in the war. The Swedes weren't.
Now, Sweden's participatory level is something that could be debated, but they weren't shooting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Everyone took a side to one extent or another. My backup suggestion would actually, I think, be Portugal.
Okay.
Not because they had anything specifically of their own that was good, but because they had a bunch of German stuff that they bought right before the war.
Mm-hmm.
Like Portugal had MG-34s.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good for most compared to the other neutral countries.
Yeah.
So
I think Sweden's a pretty easy slam dunk on this one, though.
Yeah. Anthony says to both of us, when you run through a 3-gun match, does it make you truly appreciate the 2-gun matches? I enjoy watching Karl, Russell, and Imitation Ian. That's right. Run through SMM 3-gun, but the shotgun seems to sap the fun.
Yeah, it does. And to be honest, so here's the thing. It's not the shotgun that saps the fun. It's that the entire, and this isn't denigrating. If you like 3-gun, more power to you. The more people doing competitive, safe, disciplined sports, the better with firearms. That's a good thing. For my personal interest, 3-gun's emphasis isn't where I want to be. Frequently a lot of very close range paper hidden behind things, like behind a barricade or behind barrels where you have to memorize where targets are. It's not something that I care about as a skill set. The stages are designed in a way that you strategize your method through the stage, which I don't care about. I prefer more straightforward, functional tests of skill, drill type things. I prefer physicality in the match. 3-gun typically does not have that. And the way they approach the shotgun does sap the fun out of the shotgun. I think shotgun could be fun and interesting, but the current mechanisms and how they approach it in 3-gun isn't what I want to do with a shotgun. So I think the mindset's just different. It's not my mindset, and I would prefer shotgun approached in a different way.
This question actually does not apply to me. I cannot remember the last time I actually shot a 3-gun match.
You have.
I I know I have at some point.
The first video I saw you in that made me contact you ever on Earth was because you were trying to shoot a 3-gun match.
Oh, well, I wasn't actually trying. I was using a 3-gun match as a venue to film shooting a rifle.
Yes.
I didn't take a shotgun to that match.
Oh, so you weren't even finishing the match.
I didn't even shoot half the match.
You just shot the rifle portion.
In fact, even on the stage that I filmed, I didn't shoot half the stage because I was using, this was an FG-42.
Because your whammo was the wrong whammo.
I was using steel jacketed or bimetal jacketed bullets, and so I was allowed to shoot the paper targets, but I wasn't allowed to shoot the steel targets. So that was entirely a kludge to get some video in an action shooting sort of context. I know I've shot a 3-gun match at some point, like legitimately, but I can't remember when or where.
Shotgun can be approached right, and we've done it occasionally at 2-gun.
We have a video of a series of videos, I think. Did we do? I think it was a whole series.
We should.
On one of the, it was a shotgun pistol match, a 2-gun shotgun pistol match. And it was awesome.
I really should do another 2-gun shotgun someday.
Yes. As I recall, you did that with a Saiga, and I did it with a single shot Greener Martini.
Yeah, you were a little bit handicapped on that one. And a byway on a side note. Feel free to bring all of, not your AP, but all of your bimetal jacket ammo. Bring it to the 2-gun. I love it because it doesn't do more damage to steel. In fact, it does less. But...
All right. Teddy says, load-bearing equipment. What do you think of the Chinese Type 56 chest rigs from Vietnam and Afghanistan and the Lifchik copies that the Russians made and used from Afghanistan through Chechnya? I'm assuming he means that, like, clip bra.
Yeah, well, it's a fabric material that holds 3 magazines. Some of them have buttons. The Chinese one have a little wooden dowel thingy-jiggy. And it has, like, places for other stuff.
Yeah,
on
it's
the
like
sides.
grenade, mag, grenade. Or there's the SKS one that's like 8 clip pockets.
I'll say what I think, and then you say what you think. I think it is a iconic, functional, cheap piece of crap.
Utilitarian. It works. Like, you're not going to lose the stuff that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
They cost about $5, which is nice. You're not going to get stuff out of them quickly. But, so there you go.
That sounds like functional, cheap piece of crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to fall apart, are they?
No. Those little wooden dowel things are ridiculous. I don't know what they were thinking with that.
Easy to repair in the field, probably.
It's all repairable. It's all, it's no zippers. There's no Velcro. There's none of that. But by modern standards, man, that is...
I'm just thinking, they're not necessarily a piece of crap. They may be inefficient and slow and outdated, but they're going to work.
If your definition of work is hold and retain 3 magazines and a couple grenades, could it get you killed in the streets? Yeah.
What couldn't?
But the reloads on those are glacial.
Right.
That's a problem.
But I'd rather have that and have it survive the match than have some piece of super Gucci gear that tears on a rock the first time I go prone and my mag falls out.
I don't disagree with that. I'm not saying that's a good answer, but I am saying that it does not put a priority on the individual soldier's survivability rate.
Okay.
How's that?
If your budget is $200 for all of your gear, including your rifle, that's a great piece of
When you
kit.
spend $5 on a piece of cloth, and you've got to. And by the way, it's iconic. If it's something you think's cool, I'm not saying don't enjoy it. It's just functionally, it's the bottom level of function.
Yeah. Kuzma says, why hasn't anyone come up with integrating a power source into a modern rifle?
I'd like to know the answer to that myself because I brought it up in the last Q&A that I did in New Orleans with Deviant and James from TFB. I think the idea, please steal this because this is an innovation I'd be interested in seeing. Like we're saying, is anything exciting? No, but this would be exciting to me. Imagine a rail system on a gun that has contact points all throughout it for power, and then you have a centralized battery somewhere in your rifle, and all of your snap-on doodads, click, immediately draw power from that central battery source. All of them, light, laser, night vision, optic. Why? Why have a bag of miscellaneous batteries which aren't even compatible with each other when it could all be one singular power source contained within the rifle itself?
I think the problem is probably that you're sourcing components from too many different companies. If you had a rifle and optic and laser all being made by the same people, that's something that could happen.
So if Apple made an assault rifle, we'd have this.
Honestly, if the XM8 were being made today, that's the sort of thing, because XM8 had its own proprietary modular attachment system, the PCAP thing.
It did.
I could totally see HK today incorporating power into PCAP.
I'm trying to think of what's the bad idea with this. There's two that come to mind. One, if your power source is destroyed, all of your stuff dies at once. But that could be dealt with. But that could be dealt with auxiliary. Like you could have backup battery in a unit. Like your dot has a backup in case the main power source fails. Then there's a charging issue, but maybe it's not a charging issue. It's just a magazine. It's just a magazine battery, and that's how you refill it. I think this should happen.
I think it would have some advantages in that you could put a much bigger battery like in the buttstock of the rifle, and make your optic correspondingly smaller.
Yeah. Oh, but right now the optic design changes entirely.
And with like red dot optics, you're always trying to figure out where do I put the battery so it doesn't interfere with charging handles and screw attachments and that stuff.
All the doodads change. Lasers, lights, all of them become not battery dependent in the device itself.
Something like a laser, by moving the weight of the batteries out of the laser, which is way at the end of the muzzle, and move it into some centralized spot, you'd improve balance. I think the downside is every contact point that you are not using the first time you take the rifle out is going to get destroyed.
That's why there's little rubber thingies on there.
Okay.
Rail protectors.
And then I think it's a matter of standardization. Trying to convince the rifle company, the handguard company, who's probably a different actual manufacturer than the people making the rifle, and the optic maker, and the laser maker, and the flashlight maker, convincing everyone to standardize on this one setup is challenging.
If someone wants to do this, I think it's awesome, and you have the resources, please contact info@InRange.tv. We will be your best test bed. I will put that through heck and back. I love this idea.
So here's the problem.
This is the modern thing.
Look at the closest thing you got to this, which really kind of was the XM8, where you had one company supplying a rifle with an integrated optic. And you know what everyone says? Like the G36 as well? Oh, the optic is utter crap.
Yeah, but if you provide contact points, the optics can be changed out as long as we form a standard contact system. So if the mounts are all the same or interchangeable amongst every optic provider, then it's just that's
a big if.
But it starts somewhere.
It's viable, maybe.
But it starts somewhere. Aimpoint starts with it. Let's say, for example, they make the standard. And then the rail comes with it that makes the standard. And then you augment a currently existing AR by putting the battery unit in the buttstock, running it through the system somehow where it's not an exposed wire to a rail system that now has standardized contact points. This is a possible real thing.
It is possible, yeah.
And I think it really has a lot of merit.
It actually, you might convince me.
Yeah.
All right, someone should do it.
Yep.
Where are we here?
That I'd be excited about. If we went to SHOT Show and somebody had that, I'd be like, this is exciting.
It's kind of sad that that's the most exciting thing.
But it changed, like you said.
Different wires. That's awesome.
But it changes everything, though. Like you said, it changes the optic, it changes the laser, it changes the mass out at the front of the gun.
It helps everything, but it doesn't fundamentally change. It improves the balance.
It's a step forward.
Incrementally.
It's a step forward. And then I want regenerative charging, but that's another topic.
Recoil-based charging.
I mentioned that in the last Q&A with suppressors.
Hydroskull says, if you are tasked with arming any country's armed forces in a way that you want, but only with weaponry they had access to at the end of World War II, which country would you pick? So, I misread this the first time. He's not saying pick the best World War II guns. He's saying which country at the end of World War II had the best overall small arms.
And then you would pick them to be what you would use for your weapons platform.
Who would you copy?
It's going to be sound wearable, but it's going to be Germany.
It's got to be Germany.
It's got to be, because when I say weapons platform, I think a little bit beyond this. First, we got the STG-44, the MG-34, never mind the 42. We ditched that thing. Change it.
Well, pistol, rifle, submachine gun, light machine gun.
Yeah.
Like that.
They literally,
those are the guns that you need to consider.
They have them all.
Well, everybody had them all.
No, but they have the best of all. Arguably the best of all. The STG-44 is not arguable. That's the first real assault rifle. That's not arguable.
Yeah, totally agree.
The MP40 is arguable, but it's certainly no slouch.
It's not bad, but it's not the best.
The MG34/42 isn't. The 42 continued to live on forever in different iterations in different ways.
I think the 34 would be even better, aside from its cost.
Agreed, but the 42 certainly was no.
42 works.
Was no piece of junk.
Put some extra weights in the bolt.
And then pistol. While I think that I would argue the high power is better, you still have the P38.
And the pistol really doesn't matter.
But
you could have Japanese Type 26 revolvers, and it doesn't really make any
difference. Now, when he says arm what? Arm what? Arm
a country. If you are tasked with arming any country's armed forces,
Let me add two more things to this then. Ready? V2 and the ME-262 jet. I mean, that's weaponry for an armed forces. Now we're going bigger scale.
I guess he doesn't say small.
He doesn't say small arms. So small arms, we got the STG-44, MP-40 submachine gun, the MG-34-42. You got the P-38. You have freaking missiles that go between countries, and you've got a jet fighter.
Now, to my mind, if you expand this beyond small arms to overall, Germany drops off the face.
Why?
Because I want things like radar. I think there's a lot of stuff the Allies
But is radar a weapon?
It sure worked well.
But I know, but I mean, but is it a weapon? I get you. That's a technological advantage, 100%. But is it a weapon?
The United States had night vision equipment.
So did they.
Much better than the German.
Better than the Vampire?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what the American side of that was.
We had an infrared scope on the M3 carbine, or the M2 carbine.
My fallback would be U.S., by the way. Like, those are the
Yeah.
two that come to my mind. But like, I still think Germany's like, when I see the V2 and the fighter jet.
Cool. You also get the tanks that can't go 50 miles without breaking down.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the airplane, what was the service life on a 262?
No, it's short. But that was partially material problems.
Have you seen the quote from Chuck Yeager?
Hmm.
Someone told him that, like, the 262 was this vaunted, so great.
Yeah.
His response was, the first time I saw a jet fighter, I shot it down.
Yeah.
Because he did. He had a mission where he
followed it till it landed, didn't he?
He damaged 2 on that, and then found a third one that was landing and blew its way.
Yeah, I know, I get that, but I mean, some of what was going on with that was material problems too. I mean, but we're not talking about building the worst garbage. We're talking about the designs going to another country. Like the MB-262 built with proper materials was an incredible leap forward. I don't think the Comet really had much to say. The 163 was not.
No,
didn't do anything.
That's a bad idea.
But like, I mean, they had rockets, they had the V2, they had the assault rifle, they had the sub gun, they had the machine guns. The tanks we weren't garbage. They were just too expensive and big.
And didn't work.
They broke a lot.
I think if you stick it to small arms, Germany is the clear winner. If you expand it out, then it gets to be tricky. Because I think there's a lot of stuff on the Allied side that doesn't.
And American aircraft were awesome.
Yeah, they were.
They just weren't jets yet.
Yeah, but to some extent, they didn't have to be. There's something to be said for having prop-driven planes that are 80% as good and can run 10 times as long.
Yeah, a lot of the German stuff was bleeding edge, and therefore it was iffy.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Germans died on bleeding edge tech.
Yeah.
How many guys got melted in the Comet? A lot. Literally a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Alizarin says, where do you think people are getting the idea that militaries would switch back to full-length rifle caliber, semi-automatic, or even bolt-action weapons?
I've never heard anyone say we should be going to bolt actions. I don't know where that's coming from. But I've heard a lot of talk about going back to 308.
That's because I think this goes right back to one of the questions we just answered, which is there's nothing exciting going on in the firearms industry. And so if you can find some wispy rumor that the U.S. Army has decided to throw away its M16s and go back to the FAL, people will get all excited about it because it's the most interesting thing to talk about. It's not going to happen.
I think there was someone in some room somewhere said, hey, maybe we should go back to 308 because of overmatch. Overmatch, that's the word. Or overmatched. Everyone's overmatched. Someone said that somewhere. And then that gained a little steam somewhere in some military circle. And then, as you said, the media's like, anyone covering this that has any even basic interest in this immediately turned that into the story du jour. And that made it have more reality to it than it was. And when you see stories like that, which is the U.S. is going back to 308, if you've been around a while looking at this stuff, your general reaction should be, oh, anyways, click, move on to the next story. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So, but it did spurn some weapons development. The SCAR, the XCRM, that was all part of an attempt to get 308 back into the cycle.
Yeah. Cool.
I had actually, speaking of that, I was just at this is going to be a while before the content's out, but I was just at a multiple day collaboration with PNS, primary and secondary. A lot of vets, they're talking about their experiences, and we were talking about the M1A, or the M14, excuse me, in military circles, where they had that, and they're like, people think we go fight with those things. My experience, and I'm repeating someone else, he goes, that thing sat in the truck, and the only thing we used it for was, there's some ordnance over there we want to destroy. That's when that came out, and we go, pop, pop, clear the malfunction, pop, 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 oh, it blew up, cool, put that back in the trunk. And that was the M14 service life.
That's pretty, as it applies to modern Middle Eastern stuff, that's exactly what I've heard.
Yep. Yeah. So
they issued them to us, and they never left the depot because we don't want that.
No.
Jacob says, is there some sort of currently insurmountable technical reason as to why flechette projectiles never achieve performances comparable to traditional firearm projectiles, bullets, Or is it mostly external factors, economic development effort, lack of infrastructure, etc.?
You know this. I don't know this.
Yeah, I would say they're almost insurmountable technical reasons. It becomes so difficult to make a flechette effective. So when you look at the SPEW program, when they really seriously looked at flechettes, you had accuracy issues. They're fin stabilized, and so you have to make them precisely enough that they're all going to be accurate. Like, it's easy enough to do that on a bullet that is a pretty darn uniform and completely symmetrical thing. There are no little protrusions like fins to manufacture on a bullet. This, by the way, is why the Reformation never got its little football ammo.
Oh, I was going to go there.
Yeah, never gonna happen, never did happen. There's no way they can make that stuff at anything remotely approaching profitability, so they're not going to.
Accuracy is based on consistency. How do you make essentially a dart ballistically consistent?
Right. And you can make it pretty good, but consider the standard that bullets have set. What, quarter inch at 100 yards?
Yeah. Or at least possible.
When they did SPEW, they had the flechette. You had two options. You could either put all the powder behind the flechette, which gave you a cartridge that was really long, which was a problem.
Yeah.
Or you can put the powder around the body of the flechette. That makes a shorter cartridge.
Yeah.
That's how they did it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, it means you have to have a sabot at the front of the flechette that holds onto it and pulls it down the barrel.
Yep.
They had, if you make that thing just a little too loose, the sabot goes pew down the barrel, and the flechette stays in the chamber, or rattles its way out and falls to the ground. If you make it a little too tight, they literally had trouble with the flechette snapping in half.
Whoa!
The front end of the flechette would go pow downrange,
That's cool.
and the tail half stayed in the chamber.
How fun!
You then also have to make sure that that sabot cleanly separates from the flechette every time.
And consistently, otherwise, this is actually a lot like shotgun patterning.
Yes.
Same thing, really.
Except, this gets even better / worse. In order to separate it properly with SPEW, they made these very specialized muzzle devices that would, like, break the sabot off.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they atomized it. Dudes ended up breathing sabot dust and basically getting asbestos cancer. I mean, there were literal health problems in the testing phase that were found from guys aspirating, atomized sabot.
So you got radium girls and now you got flechette boys.
Yeah. In order to make the flechette work, like half the point of it was its super high velocity.
Yeah.
4,500 feet per second, because it's like a 10 grain projectile. Yeah, the thing was substantially louder than a standard rifle. Guys don't wear earplugs. They didn't then. So I guess some guys do today, but you put troops in combat, they're not really going to want to denigrate their hearing. Like, I'd rather lose my hearing firing a couple rounds than not hear the guy that sneaks up and shoots me. So none of these are individually maybe insurmountable problems, but you put them all together and it's like, what's the benefit at the tail? Like, if we overcome all of these, what do we get out of it?
And even if you make it
a little
accurate,
flatter shooting?
even if you make it accurate, what's the ballistic coefficient of a freaking flechette that weighs that little anyway?
Well, it's very aerodynamic compared to a bullet.
Yeah, I know.
It's going very fast, so it has less time to drop. You definitely get a better trajectory.
And then what does it do when it hits something?
That's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
It's just not...
Literally a needle.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if it bends and does that sort of thing, maybe it'll be pretty effective. But
you dip them in poison first.
Oh, that's the secret. Yeah, I forgot about that. So,
anyways, the Reformation. It's like I was going to say, just make it rifled without turning, and then make little fishy things, and then call it a day.
God, I love the ATF letter that came out on that thing.
But it's tank technology.
Yeah. You remember that letter?
Not completely. No, I remember bits of it. It's like It's like you made this legal thing that's no longer what you thought it was, so now it's got a different problem.
They managed to make it not a NFA registered item, but it is a GCA controlled item. So you don't have to have a tax stamp, but you do have to get ATF permission to take it between states. Like, what? All this so that I don't get to have rifling? That's awesome.
But you still can't buy the fishy bullets anyway, so...
That's a really good way to describe those things.
Yeah.
All right. Jacob. No, we just did Jacob. Philip says, any tips other than just more practice to get over the jitters / adrenaline rush of the first stage of the match? After the first stage, my adrenaline drops and my accuracy goes up.
Just do it more.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else. And honestly, care about your score, but don't care what others think. Because if you care about what others think, that's part of the jitters.
Yeah.
If you're worried about your performance in front of them, they don't matter. So that's irrelevant. Or do a bunch of stuff on the internet that we think lots of people are going to watch and then read the comments and then just become completely hardened. That's another answer too. Is there not true? Is that not true? Yeah.
Yeah. The more cynical and jaded you become, the less you care what happens.
What happens when you use an infield at the 3-gun match? Turns out you suck. Like, this is how it works.
All right, Eric says, is there a reason we haven't seen a modern replacement to the M2 50 cal Browning?
Isn't it because it just works?
It's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And we've already got them.
Yeah, and what else do you need to do 50 cal with besides that?
Like, it's heavy, but you're not really planning to carry it around anyway because the ammo is too big and too heavy to carry a usable amount of the ammo anyway. So.
Yep, cool.
Ed says, Karl, having shot a World War I BAR, do you hate them less?
I hate it less than the A2. I think now that I've shot the World War I BAR and I've shot a semi-automatic, well, I've shot both. In a match, I shot an A2 semi-auto, and I've shot the A2 full auto as well. The World War I one needs a bipod, but it doesn't need the A2 bipod. I think the A1 was probably the answer, but I don't know why they did the A2 after they did the day one. The A1 really kind of fixed a lot of that. It fixed with little things that were niggling wrong with the first edition, the first model, whatever, the World War I edition.
There's not a whole lot wrong with the first one.
No, but the bipod, man, shooting that thing without support.
It does need a bipod.
So you put that little A1 bipod that's just like the sticks, and you retain the World War I sights, and you keep semi versus full. That seems like a good BAR.
Yeah.
Or I haven't had experience with the Colt monitor. I mean, you could talk to the monitor.
The monitor's cool, but it's a totally different gun. Like, the BAR into World War II was being pushed into the role of a light machine gun.
Yeah.
The monitor is the same gun, the same basic gun,
Yeah.
pushed into the role of shoulder rifle.
Yeah.
Like, make it lighter, make it shorter, make it, put a big old compensator on it so you can shoot it from the shoulder, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do as a light machine gun. You want to make it a little heavier, maybe a quick change barrel, give it a bipod. So it's the evolutionary tree of the BAR diverged.
You know what the monitor is perfect for, though?
Shooting motor bandits.
Ambushing Bonnie and Clyde. Yeah.
It is a pretty freaking awesome.
Monitor's good for that.
The monitor honestly strikes me very much like the H car.
I've hail-nilled an H car. This is another gun we've been trying to get on the channel.
Love to get an H car.
Haven't got our hands on an H car.
I don't know which would be cooler, a full auto H car or a Colt monitor. But I'd love to have a chance to find out.
Need to be the guy to find that out.
All right. Christopher asks a question that will not die. Let this perhaps be the last time people ask this question. Will we do a Flintlock 2-gun action challenge match?
No, never. Nope. There may someday be a Flintlock thing on InRange, and it will not be a match. It will be just talking about Flintlocks for some reason, but it will not be a match. There's really, once you get older than World War II, 2-gun becomes, even 2-gun, which is designed as a lower round count environment, becomes very hard to shoot to the point of maybe being unpleasant.
Yeah.
When you get to World War I, you're like, this is like pushing a rock uphill twice. Below World War I, it becomes worse. So like a Flintlock is like, you would par out before you got 3 rounds down range, and that's if the thing went off. Literally, no.
Yeah. London says, what do you guys personally think the gun industry should be investing in or creating or developing? I still want a reproduction Bren 10 and FNC.
I kind of answered this earlier. I want that integrated power system.
Yeah.
I can't answer anything better. I hate to say this, and I wish this wasn't the case. Repro things are awesome, and I love historic guns. They're not a real market. They're just not.
They really aren't.
There's this small subset of people that really want them, but when you make them to that small subset of people, they're too expensive for most of even those people to afford them. Yeah. So, and that's if they work.
And then a lot of the times, the people who can't afford them can probably afford to get the real thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see more repro, but do you have anything that you'd want to see in particular?
Actually, it would be cool to see a little bit more obsolete ammo put back into production.
Again, a market that's not real.
Well, no, but I think some of this is, because there's so much less overhead in tooling up for producing a cartridge than a gun. Think of all the Martini Henrys out there.
Yeah.
lot of black powder rifles. The Mausers, 11 millimeter Mauser, your Gewehr 71, 7184s, French 11 millimeter Gras.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these guns are out there. And I think part of the problem is probably liability. People being afraid to make the ammo because someone's going to have a 150-year-old rusted through gun that's going to blow up. But I'd love to see, obviously, 7.65 French long, although that's coming. Starline.
Really?
Yes, I have a bag of unhead stamped Starline 7.65 French long brass. It's finally coming.
Wow.
But there were a couple more than just that.
You know what I'd like to see, actually, now that you're saying this?
Yeah.
44 Henry rimfire. There's a lot of those guns.
Yeah.
They are. And some of them are within some of the 1860s, not some, but some of them are within obtainable price.
Yeah.
They are originals. But there's nothing to feed them with. And there's a lot of handguns that are in 44 Henry rimfire back from the day. And it'd be super cool. Or 41 Derringer.
Yeah.
Like the Remington round.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of those Derringers. Like, and Navy Arms did the 41 for a little while.
Yeah.
But the 44 rimfire.
Yeah. So I would love to see more supply of ammunition.
I like that
for
answer.
historic firearms.
And I'd love to shoot some 44 Henry rimfire, like the legit stuff. And then, if there really was an ammo supply, someone making a repro 1860 or 66 could make it in 44 rimfire. Because there's the current repro, really, there's no reason you couldn't easily make that the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you could have the original cartridge.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.
All right. Mattia says, is there a gun you really want to shoot at a match, but never have been able to?
There's two for me. What are yours?
Sturmgewehr.
That's one.
Another Sturmgewehr.
MP18. I want to shoot the original submachine gun with a trommel.
I want to play with an MP18, but not at a match.
Oh, I'd want to shoot it at the match because I think it'd be really interesting to put that on the clock and do the time on it and all that. Actually, on that note, I'd also like to do, you know what, a whole lot of submachine guns now that I think about it. Sturmgewehr is top of the list. Absolutely. MP18, but it would be interesting to do like a real MP40, a Papa Shaw. Those subguns would be really interesting. But
I like shooting them.
top of the list for me would be Sturmgewehr and MP18.
Timo says, is there going to be a meetup for just Patreon supporters during Finnish Brutality? I'd say a little meetup in some shooting range would be awesome.
It's interesting you said just Patreon supporters. I guess I didn't read that clearly the first time I looked at it. I'm pretty sure Varis Deleka will put something together that'll be an event at the store because it's going to be a collaborative effort. It's not just InRange at the show, at the shoot. It's going to be also Polinar Tactical and Bloke on the Range are going to be there. So this is really 3 channels showing up for this thing.
Well, 2 channels, sadly.
Yeah, you're not.
I am not able to make it. So
Yeah.
it'll be Karl, Polinar, Bloke. In fact, that's just half a Bloke because I think you get a Bloke but not a chap.
All right, you're right. We're getting a Bloke but no chap. We're getting me but no Ian, and we're getting a bunch of Polinar.
Yeah.
So, but that's still really cool. I'm sure we're going to have something that's like that. As for Patreon only supporters, let me look into it. I don't know yet.
Right. Zachary has asked us this question several times.
Which is why I put it in.
And we don't have a good answer, but we're going to answer it. I was wondering if y'all have looked into or considered 25-45 Sharps as an upper for an AR-15 upper. Option for an AR-15 upper. The answer is no.
No, I haven't. I don't care about these whiz-bang calibers, to be honest. I just don't. No offense, Zachary. I may be great. It's not something that's on my interest level. And if I'm not interested in it, and you're not interested in it either, it sounds like we're not probably going to do a video on it, and that's why we have not.
When it comes to something like an AR, I'm much more interested in being able to shoot in volume. And I can do that with 5.56. I can do it with 5.45. You'll notice we haven't really ever messed with 300 or 6.5 or 6.8.
None of that. We've left all of it because it's like,
Yeah. Optimizing the cartridge to that level just isn't my bag.
Neither of us, really.
Adam says, how far away do you and Ian think are small arms energy weapons?
I think it's unpredictable. I think I think first of all, I don't know. Are we at a point with enough power to make an energy weapon that actually is effective? Right?
Not that you can carry on you.
Well, hold on. If we just hook, if you had unlimited power, never mind the power source, you made a thingy that shot energy beam. Is that a thing that could exist now?
I honestly don't know.
I don't know.
I know it is on the large scale. Like shooting down missiles is technically feasible.
Yeah, but this thing.
A gun,
I don't know that it's even possible to make a small arm that shoots an energy beam that destroys stuff yet. That's a question I don't know. But the bigger problem, even if this thing did exist, is the power source. And we have to see a huge revolution in power sources and battery technology for this to be viable. And the answer to this is, how long away is it? I don't know. There could be a breakthrough tomorrow. Elon Musk might smoke one more joint tomorrow and then suddenly when like suddenly all battery technology changes. Like it could happen,
That's kind of what it's going to depend on.
but that will happen.
Yeah.
But to tell you the date,
Consider what the technological change was required to go from flint to percussion. Like, magic powder paste makes gun go bang. That's kind of what it would have looked like at the time.
Yeah.
You know, how do you predict when someone's going to invent the percussion cap? Same sort of deal.
And it may not be Elon Musk. It might be some guy in his garage right now just pouring chemicals together and he makes the new battery. Yeah. I'm just saying that's going to be an unpredictable event.
Yeah. Christopher says, I'll re-ask my lever gun question. Do you think a box magazine-fed lever gun would be a viable alternative in states that are hostile to semi-auto firearms?
I think a lever gun's viable without being box-fed.
Viable for what?
I'm assuming he means self-defense.
It depends. It always depends.
Good point. Let me assume he means self-defense. If you assume that, I don't see why a standard lever gun isn't already there. Why does it need to be box-fed? Yeah. The box-fed lever guns are all those rack and pinion thingamajigs. I'm not that big a fan of those things. They're kind of weird. I think it could be done, but I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Like the Browning has this like rack and pinion lever gun box-fed thing. It's beautiful. It looks like a piece of art. I can't remember the name of it. Is it the BLR? Browning level rifle?
Oh, I've never looked inside one of those things. I know the 1895 Winchester.
It's got freaking gears. Anyways, yeah. Could you make like a 66 or 73 box fed?
If you're using this for self-defense, what's the chance you actually have to change the magazine?
That's the point. Do you really need more? Do you need more than the 13 rounds in a standard tube?
Probably not.
And now people are going to think that we're anti-capacity, which we are not. If you want to make a 60-round lever gun, I think that's cool. But the reality is, statistically speaking, for the purposes of self-defense, 13-round or 10-round magazine in a lever gun is generally statistically sufficient.
Yeah.
So you don't need a box fed.
And it's more likely to work.
And if you get good with a lever gun, you can keep that thing filled up for a long time. Oh, well, yeah. But that's not saying we're against capacity. Nope. If someone comes up with a 60-round mag, great. That's not my point.
Scott says, when I go to matches, I spend most of my time taping and resetting targets. When you guys play around in the trooper and armored trooper divisions, do you have to do this sort of work? Or are you exempted because of all the heavy crap you're carrying? Nope, not exempt from crap.
You do all the same stuff.
Yep, it just sucks more.
Now, in trooper, you don't have to carry all of your ammunition between stages. You have to carry it. You have to carry it through the stage. Right. But like when you get to the stage and you're in the queue, you can put that crap down. Yeah. And so that helps with reset. When you're in armored, you could theoretically take the armor off, but you're not gonna, because putting that stuff on is like taking your shoes and socks off. It's just, you just leave it on because it's too much effort. So no, you do it all with it on.
Yeah, because you get the armor on and then you get sweaty, and then if you take the armor off, and then your body starts to cool down because it's all exposed to air, and then you go to put your armor back on, and your armor is cold and wet and slimy, and it's just gross. Just leave it on.
Not just that, the amount of weight that it puts on your shoulder, you get to the point where you're like just dealing with the ow, and you take it off, and suddenly everything relaxes. Putting it back on is worse. Yeah, it actually hurts more. Like you just deal with it.
Chance says, do you think there's a benefit to having the gas port on top of the barrel versus the bottom of the barrel? For example, barrel life or reliability.
I don't think it affects either of those at all.
No, it does not.
I think it might affect design, and we had a debate about this.
Yes.
I think it might affect the design in a way that if you had the gas port and gas piston or whatever on the bottom, that unless you're doing something particularly clever, it will take the barrel offline of inline recoil impulse.
I think
that's a design thing, though.
Yeah. I think you have an issue there of my words are failing me.
Words are hard.
You may end up with it looking like that, but I don't think it's a direct cause and effect.
I don't think it matters that much.
E. Jeremy says, what's the easiest assault rifle to manufacture? It depends.
Yeah.
What machine tools do you have?
What's your technology?
Seriously, what machine tools do you have?
But I mean, like, for example, just in the basic, when you look at, for example, let's just take some of the basic concepts. Like when you looked at an AK, stamped sheet metal system, gun. An AR-15, which is, aluminum thingamajig that's not stamped sheet metal. Stamped sheet metal stuff's kind of hard.
Yes.
I think the AR is probably an easier gun to manufacture. If you have the materials.
It's like, in theory, you can hammer out one AK flat at a time. As we addressed earlier, I've done it. I guess you can also technically mill out one AR lower at a time. But first off, the AK is simple to manufacture. This is a myth. It is
No,
not
it's quite
simpler.
complex, actually.
Yeah, none of these, like, there is no such thing as a current locked breech rifle that is easy to manufacture on an industrial scale. Like, I think a lot of them are fairly relatively similar. It's just you're going to buy different tools, and there is a level of difficulty in building ARs. Like, if you buy an AK factory and decide to start building ARs, you're going to have some trouble because you're not going to have any equipment for drop forging aluminum.
Yeah.
Same thing vice versa. You buy an AR factory and decide to start making AKs, you probably don't have any good stamping presses.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like, yeah, it's a question that's kind of impossible to answer.
I guess it depends.
Yes. Dragonbait has another repeat question. With all the 308 shooting you've been doing, does it make sense to choose or issue a 308 individual rifle over an intermediate cartridge rifle?
No, absolutely no, 100% no.
It depends. What are you trying to do with it?
I think no.
In a military sense, no.
I think that's what he's talking about. He's saying to issue.
He does say issue.
So he's talking military.
So, no.
I don't see it. I mean, and now we're going to get the whole diatribe about, well, you guys aren't in combat. I get that. But there's a thing here, which is one of the things you have to do with a rifle is be able to actually aim at things and hit them reliably and effectively with the ammunition you have on your person. And intermediate cartridges provide that ability to do that. And they're the middle ground between something too impotent and too powerful. 308 is on the too powerful side. It really is. And the age of the battle rifle expired before battle rifles were even made. They should have been intermediate cartridges by the time battle rifles were a thing. And the world went, oh, yeah, put that to the side, and then everything became intermediate cartridge. And in my opinion, 308 has niche applications, but they absolutely should not be the norm.
All right.
What do you think?
Not quite that forceful about it, but I would agree. I think the main advantage that 5.56 brings is volume of ammunition you can carry.
308 just makes everything harder. How's that? It makes everything harder. It makes training harder. It makes marksmanship harder. It makes getting the hits harder. It makes it harder to carry. It makes you carry less.
Yeah.
All those things are a big problem, and that you just can't mitigate that.
Ammo Sherpas.
Yes.
And they can hold the rifle for you, too.
That you could do. If you had that, ammo Sherpas, I'm okay. And you're right.
Matt says, assuming 15-round mags, Browning High Power or CZ75?
CZ.
CZ, yeah. Better gun. Newer, improved. The CZ75 is a product improved Browning High Power.
High Power's a great gun. Don't get me wrong. But
Yeah.
the CZ's better.
Yeah. Alan, the year is 2030. World War III has broken out between the Neo-Finnish Empire and Hyper Korea.
Hyper Korea, I like this. Hyper Korea. Neo-Finnish and Hyper Korea. That's a weird war. How did they... That would be naval battle.
Clearly, they split Russia between them.
Wow. Crazy. All right.
Taking into account advances in modern manufacturing techniques, what might the cheap wartime production last-ditch or resistance-built firearms look like in this future global conflict? CNC milling, 3D printed polymers, stamping, spot welding. I don't know.
2030. So we're talking...
Sintered metal 3D printing?
That's what I think. That's what I was going. But I mean, we don't know. We can't predict. This is kind of like the battery thing. Like, when can this happen, right?
Probably happen on these things instead.
It'll be a cyber war more than a shooting war. But my guess is when it comes last ditchy, which is what he's talking about, I think you're talking about sinter metal printing.
They're going to hack into your rifle's universal power supply and just shut it off.
They might. Remember the wireless light system we looked at SHOT Show a couple years back, and the questions about how does the communication between the grip and the light not get blocked or jammed? Or worse, how do I,
randomly engaged by other people?
As an attacker, how do I could just turn your light on, which would be really bad. And the guy went, he was great. He went, I don't know. It's an interesting question. But in this regard, I'm going to go with 2030 is long enough off.
Yes,
and YouTube will already have deleted all our content by 2030, so you can't reference this. I'm going to say center metal 3D printing will be the standard.
Or something that we don't even know about yet.
Could be.
Replicators. Which is kind of sintered.
Kinda.
Sintered molecule 3D printing.
Yeah, kinda.
A la Snow Crash. Ryan says, where can we buy the InRange tactical bathrobe?
Walmart.
Yep. Sean says, what was wrong with World War II German steel-cased 8mm? I have read several accounts of Eastern Front machine gunners who had to hoard brass ammo for when things got tough and only use steel case for attacks.
I've read a lot of this as well. I'm sure you have as well. There was a bunch of the guys that were switched on They had their belt of brass for the oh no moments, and then they had the steel for when they were willing to clear malfunctions.
Yeah.
And it was consistent. I've read this from many machine gunners.
Yeah. I think this is not a problem with steel case because it's steel case. This is a problem with Germany was running out of all sorts of materials, which is, and it was lack of brass that led them to start making steel cased ammo at about the same time that their quality control kind of went to crap, kind of across the board.
A convergence
on
of
everything.
circumstances.
Right. So it's not that steel case was bad because it was steel. Steel case was bad because it was badly made ammo. Brass case was typically stuff that had been in inventory in depots.
Yep.
And had been made earlier to a better standard. It's worth pointing out that the United States made significant use of steel-cased ammo in World War II. You never hear about problems with it because it didn't cause any.
Is it possible? I don't know about this. People that are shooting current shooters that own an MG42, will those run quality steel case without a problem?
I can't imagine they wouldn't.
I don't know. I don't own one.
Yes.
Like I'd love to have one. If we.
Well, actually, you know what? I can tell you absolutely yes, because stuff like that Romanian.
Oh yeah, that's steel case.
Oh, machine gun guys, 42s and 34s eat that.
And they run that no problem.
Yep.
So it's not that.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think it's just a convergence of steel case and quality of ammunition quality. On that note, just for funsies, go Google like World War II German ammunition and look at the bullets, World War II German bullets, not just the ammunition but the projectiles. As you get to the end, you're like, look at the 9mm in particular. When you see their bullets at the end, it looks like someone's like, we got to make bullets, and they like take lead and go, and then like shove it in the stuff's bad. It's bad. It's really bad.
Tim says, what's the legality of the RONI system? It seems like it would be illegal as it converts a Glock to be an SBR.
Well, it does convert a Glock to
Yes,
an
it
SBR.
does.
You can SBR a Glock and put a RONI on it.
It is worth pointing out that while the registry is closed to new machine guns, it is not closed to short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, destructive devices, or any other weapons.
So if you want to SBR your Glock and put a RONI on it, there's nothing illegal about it. Right. If you buy a RONI and put it on your Glock without SBRing it, it absolutely is an NFA violation. Yep. And if you have a RONI and a Glock, you're in, what is it called? Constructive possession. So don't do that. Yeah. So if you want a RONI, SBR your Glock first, then put on the RONI. Yeah. And then buy the RONI.
Or buy it and put it somewhere else.
Don't have them together, like it's crossing the streams until you have the SBR.
Yeah. Marcus says, and by the way, this takes us to our last page.
Cool.
Marcus says, hey guys, greetings from Canada. In our country, the RCMP mandates all non-restricted rifles be limited to a 5-round capacity, with the exception of rimfire and the exception of the M1, which is specifically called out and allowed with an 8-round capacity.
Wow.
This being the case, what would you consider a more effective tool in a combat situation? 5-round intermediate cartridge, 5-round capacity magazines of an intermediate cartridge rifle,
like an AR,
or full power, or even a full power rifle, FN49, Argentina FN49, FAL G3,
BRN10.
Although I think those are all restricted anyway. 5-round mags, or a 22 that's got a 25-round, Butler Creek Awesome mag.
I immediately just go, why you answered your question in your question.
Yes,
go with the M1.
The M1 is better than either of those.
Yeah. 8-round M-block clips, if you're good with a Garand, you can be incredible with those things.
Yeah. Now, if you take the Garand off the table, to get a combat weapon, I would say an intermediate caliber or full power caliber rifle, depending on whatever your circumstances are, but one that is capable of being used with stripper clips. Because I don't want to carry a satchel full of 5-round mags.
Yep.
Either they're going to be little short, purpose-made 5-rounders, which are generally going to be a pain in the butt to get in and out of magazine wells. You ever play with 5-rounders in a Mini 14?
Oh, yeah.
Mag wells are made, there are 5 rounds of mag in the mag well, and then the rest of it comes out.
Putting the square in the round hole.
Yeah. Or you've got 30-rounders or 20-rounders that are pinned to 5 rounds. And then you're carrying this much mag to get this much ammo.
Which is dumb.
Okay, you want to carry 40 rounds on you. Great, that's 8 30-round magazines, but you get 5 rounds per. So what I would do is carry the rifle with a mag in it, maybe 1 or 2 spare mags in case you damage it, and then your spare ammo all in stripper clips.
I'm totally going with 8-round M-block clips. You can have a bag of those in their pockets. You can have them everywhere.
I agree that's best.
Yeah, okay.
But his question only tangentially mentions the Garand.
Fair.
I don't want a 22 rimfire.
No. Here's the other thing I would say to this, is that if you artificially decrease my capacity of magazine capacity based on laws, I'm going to increase my cartridge caliber. So if you take away 5.56 30 rounds, but if I could have a 5-round 5.56 or a 5-round 308, this is where I start going. I'm going 308 because at least then 5.56. The benefit is you've got a bunch of them,
Right.
and you can have rapid return fire, or you can have controlled doubles or pairs, or you can miss and then recover. 308 has the benefit of if you hit, you freaking hit with a 308. So I would rather have 308.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Jeremy says, why are there no dual feed magazine pistols? Is it due to size restrictions?
Well, there are.
Yeah, there are. Not a ton of them. They're a decent number. The Steyr GB comes to mind. The Stechkin. There are a bunch of Russian and Chinese ones. More of those than any other country, as far as I can think of. Even all the way back, there was a weird little, the Sundgård, Norwegian or Swedish pistol.
I don't remember that one.
25-round mags. Double stack, double feed, like in 1906, I think. So they're out there. The problem is, if you have a single feed magazine, first off, your slide is able to be narrower because you only have to accommodate one cartridge right in the middle.
That's a big one.
And it's always following the same path. So your feed ramp is relatively easy to create compared to a double stack where you've got a cartridge up here and then up here and then here. Yep. And you need twice as much complex geometry in the feed. Plus your breech face has to be wide enough to accommodate, 2 cartridges. There are some pistols where this is not a problem. The Steyr GB is huge. The Stechkin is huge. And you're generally looking at magazines that are top out at 15 rounds in a single feed. The reason you've got double feed in all the rifles is because a single feed magazine that's 30 plus rounds gets to be a reliability issue.
Not just a reliability issue, a loading issue.
Yeah,
that's why a lot of the submachine guns that were double stack single feed require a loading tool.
Yeah.
Like you will not load that magazine without a loading tool.
You definitely won't load the 5th one without a loading tool.
Right. But now, like a double stack pistol mag that only holds 10 or 15, that's a different problem. You're not getting to 33 rounds.
Yeah.
Spring capacity makes it unviable.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
well, you can get 33. Glock makes a 33 rounder, but it's a huge pain to load.
It is.
And they're, all things considered, less reliable than the standard.
Thank you for saying that. Well, Glock mags are good.
I think a 33-round Glock mag is going to be, on average, less reliable than a 15-round.
And the big deal, and of course the submachine gun spring has to have more tension because of the cyclic rate and all that. But I think you've answered that more thoroughly.
So, can be done, but it's harder.
And there's not a lot of advantage.
And our very last question is from Jacob. Any chance of seeing videos of challenge matches with some of the newer PMAG adapters? The ACR, the XCR, the CZ Bren, the ETC, even these, etc.
The ETC is one of the ones, actually we didn't mention earlier, it's one of the guns I'm most excited about. Yeah, the ETC really looks compelling to me. But that's already happening. We've got a bunch of content about the MDR out now. There's XCR content actually in the works right now, an XCR M and 308.
Yep, we did some shooting with it today.
Yeah, so that's a thing that's actually happening.
Don't have a Bren.
Nope, and we don't have an ACR either.
Yeah.
But over time that will happen, but stay tuned for, if there's already MDR stuff, there's more MDR coming. There's a bunch of XCR M stuff coming. Yeah, that's a thing. We always hear conflicting tales from people about how much they want to see historic guns versus modern guns. So it's an interesting razor edge to walk on. That's it.
That's it. Done.
Thanks for staying tuned for a very long episode, but the Q&As are always super popular.
Yeah, so they're fun to do too.
And we really appreciate all the Patreons that make this viable. If you are a supporter, thank you. If you're not, please consider it. And then you could submit questions on here like this as well as other things. Like this has turned into an audio podcast format for our Patreon supporters, $1 and above, for anyone who wants to listen to it in their car without having to turn on the YouTube thing or give that corporation money to let it run in the background, which I don't advise. If you're not, please consider it. If you can't, we understand. Subscribe to all of our different distribution networks. You can find them all on InRange.tv. Thanks a lot.